Hello everyone, and welcome to another virtual program with the National Portrait Gallery. It's so lovely to see you all coming in through the Zoom room and on Facebook Live today. Thanks so much for joining us. Even though it looks like it's nighttime in the background, of course, you're all used to the smoke and mirrors that we do with the National Portrait Gallery now. No, I am sitting in front of a green screen, but we are working across time zones today. And our special guest, Dave Tacon, will be joining us shortly from Shanghai. So before we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which I'm broadcasting to you from today, the Ngambri and the Ngunnawal peoples, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to extend that same respect to any of the Indigenous people joining us today, and also to any of the traditional custodians of the lands on which you're coming to us from today. So we do like our programs to be interactive here at the Portrait Gallery. So if you have any questions throughout the program, please pop them into the chat function on Zoom, which should be along the bottom part of your device, or throw them into the Facebook comments. And we have Hector, Robert and Matt working busily behind the scenes to take any of your questions, comments. And please do let us know where you're joining us from. I hope that there are some people coming to us from China. That would be nice. But I also see some familiar faces here today as well. And welcome to all of you regulars who are supporting our programs both through lockdown and now that we're starting to emerge back into real life. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Penny Grist, our curator, who is going to be in conversation with our special guest, Dave. Over to you, Penny and Dave.
Thank you so much, Jill. This is very exciting to have another one of our international connections, and a great pleasure for me to revisit some of the portraits in the collection, as well as to hear from Dave about his journey with photography, but mostly his time in Shanghai and his recent work as well. So it's going to be a packed 45 minutes. So I think we'll dive straight into it. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dave Tacon, who's been a friend of the Portrait Gallery for many, many, many years. And I'd love to start off by asking you, Dave, just where did your love of photography begin, and how did your career get going?
Well, I did an exchange through the University of Melbourne to Berlin in, I think, 1998. 99, and it was a great city to photograph. I just got into photography with a point and shoot camera, and I guess friends were encouraging me. It's like when like quite a while before digital. I mean, I assisted some people. I mean, I did some assisting in Hong Kong before I sort of landed back in Melbourne with a thud, and I was assisting a guy called David Simmons, who was I think president of the Australian Commercial and Media Photographers at one point, which doesn't exist anymore. I think he's on the board of the Australian Institute of Professional Photographers now. He was architecture and industrial photography mostly. And I assisted on this thing that they did, which they brought together three great photographers. I think it was Graham Munro, Sam Haskins and Gary Heary to present their work to other professional photographers and do a slideshow and a talk. And especially Gary Heary's work just like really blew me away, and his stories. And I thought, yeah, I've got to do this. And actually gave Gary a lift to the airport. It was about a 3-hour drive. So that was, fantastic for someone who just wants to pick someone's brain and sort of work out how it all works. I think assisting photographers is also a really useful thing, especially dealing with clients, and especially probably one of the most important things I learned about commercial shoots is when things go wrong, to make it look like you've come to I've had a flash of inspiration and you've come to a creative decision. This isn't really working for me, and it's like, this is the stuff I'm hired to do. This is creative solution. Like, this is how we're going to do it. And reality just like a light broke or something.
And so since then, where has your work been appearing in your career? Like, where do you, what sort of work do you do? What sort of jobs have you had?
I mean, it's a wide variety of stuff. I mean, I used to write as well as shoot stories. I was kind of, I was spending a bit of my time as like a freelance foreign correspondent, writing for different magazines and newspapers, and it was also that was a way to get my my photography published. don't do it so much anymore. I mean, who have I worked for? Like, who have I worked for recently?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been shooting for US Vogue at Shanghai Fashion Week for the last 3 seasons, which is interesting. I mean, the work I like to do is sort of photojournalism, and I've been able to work for magazines like Stern, the German news pictorial. They're great to work for, and I should have some assignments coming up for a Swedish newspaper, Dagens Nyheter, which is also good to work for. And I work for all these mostly the Australian ones. Like we used to do assignments for the Australian over here in the Australian Financial Review and Good Weekends, but not much of that going on these days.
Mm. So we've got 18 portraits by you in the collection, which is really exciting. And we're not going to go through all 18 now, but I've selected some of my favorites. And I always, as a curator, enjoy the privilege of having a captive artist to tell us some backstories of some of the portraits in the collection. So we're going to enjoy Dave just taking us through a few of these shoots. And it's funny, I find this really fascinating because you have they're so pared back in a way. There's a real immediacy and honesty to these shots. And so it's even sort of more fascinating to hear your experience of capturing them. So we might start with Tony Matachesky, the fashion designer.
Right. Well, I didn't have very much time with Tony. I had a chat with him to interview him for a story I was doing on Australian fashion designers showing at New York Fashion Week. That was for West Weekend, which is a newspaper in the West Australian magazine. Doesn't exist anymore, like a lot of magazines I used to work for in Australia. But anyway, he was really exhausted. He'd been up all night. Did all the sewing himself, which is like a lot of designers don't know how to use a sewing machine or whatever. But he's certainly an exception there. And yeah, it was just really, really quick. I mean, we're just talking like a couple of minutes, really.
Oh, wow.
I used the lights that just in the backstage area. And, this is kind of how I do all my portraits in a way. I mean, with something like that, I didn't really have any preconceived ideas because, I knew I was going to be backstage. I suppose I was just looking to shoot it in a way that didn't really look backstage or had a hint of that. Mm-hmm. And it was uncluttered. So, yeah, there was just this backdrop, which sort of really sort of suits his style of clothes anyway, but it's his backstage area, so I guess he would have had some say in that anyway. And it's just catching these lights sort of shining through the this backdrop.
Oh, that's
there's also some other ones. I think sitting on some steps, but that was the best one. My cat has just come to say hi. Here he is.
Introduce your cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enormous ginger cat. Long haired, very vain. Doesn't really like being picked up. It loves to be groomed. His favorite thing is to be brushed, right? Glue.
And we experienced the international working from home experience of having our pets drop in. So let's move on to Pat Mcgraw. So youth mental health expert, psychiatrist, psychologist, Australian of the Year in 2010. How did you come to photograph him?
I photographed him a couple of times. Both times it was sort of to do with the University of Melbourne. I used to do a bit of work for. I was quite friendly with the editor of Uni News, which is a publication. I don't think they have it anymore. That I used to do shoots every week or every couple of weeks, and I usually just really quick portraits. I just turn up and would wander around and sort of see what's available in terms of natural light and just it's still the way I tend to shoot portraits. So wherever we met him, there was this pink wall. So and it really went with his eyes and his his choice of wardrobe, blue. Probably should have cleaned up that color a bit, but I guess that's sort of that's how he was. So yeah, nice guy. Yeah, very nice guy.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? Because you, in both of these stories, that sense of immediacy is real, and it really translates into how you react to the portrait. Is this a similar story, David Williamson?
Yeah, I got a lot. I
Playwright?
mean, I had like quite a few commissions. I think 10 or 11 that I went and did for the National Portrait Gallery in 2012, maybe. Yeah. Well, I guess that was in the summer, just before I left for Shanghai. So I had a good old chat. I mean, sort of grew up with the work of David Williamson. My mother was an English teacher, so we had copies of his screenplays and plays lying around. I got him to sign, I think, True Lies. I think, unfortunately, couldn't find the copy of Gallipoli we used to have that was falling apart. But yeah, one thing I can remember is that he's just about the tallest guy. Well, definitely the tallest playwright that I've ever photographed. I mean, I'm pretty tall anyway. I'm like 6'2", but I'm just like staring up at him. I mean, I stood on a chair to get a sort of like eye contact kind of portrait with him. So yeah, this is in his apartment, which overlooks the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And yeah, I mean, there were quite a few. I mean, like, I think there was also a portrait of his desk, and you can kind of see like, yeah, like, so his sort of physical presence when he's in this room where he writes. But they didn't use that one. I think we went out and took a walk in the park, and we were just, nattering away about all kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you've seen Gallipoli, actually, he's the ruckman who they sort of conspired to knock out. This, like, that big guy. That's his cameo in Gallipoli.
That's right. That's right. So Paralympian Michael Milton.
Yeah, so that was in Melbourne, and yeah, again, we met him, just had a chat, and I mean, I arranged to meet him sort of late in the afternoon, or this is sort of early in the shoot, to spend a few hours and see how the natural light was developing, and then just see what would sort of present itself. So I mean, these shoots are kind of an improvisation in a way. Mm. So we ended up here, and I mean, I didn't really sort of think that, oh, this is like a metaphor for anything, but I guess if you want to read that into it, and yeah.
Yeah, you could, I suppose. I hadn't thought about that either, but yeah, I am always transfixed by the light and the trees and this beautiful one. It's really interesting hearing you talk through the creation of the sort of serendipitous creation of the backgrounds in these works. How about
so yeah, Jane Kersey. Yeah, so we're also going to see Raymond Gator, and I photographed Raymond Gator before Jane Kersey, and I think he knows Jane Kersey pretty well. And I mentioned I was going to be photographing next, and he said, a man of few words. And like, he wasn't kidding. I mean, I really found it difficult to engage with him, unfortunately. I mean, I'd say something and he'd either like say nothing, just look at me, or just say a few words, and that was kind of it. And I really kind of regret not being able to sort of build a rapport, and it's kind of what I try to do. But yeah, I mean, I remember seeing a front page story in the International New York Times about how, because he mentioned this, like when he was a teenager, he was a really keen photographer. So all these black and white photographs from his youth were on display, because he donated his entire archive to, somewhere in South Africa. Yeah, and that was really interesting. But I didn't really manage to learn more about that, like, while I met him, which was in Adelaide. Mm. And this might have been like the first or second photo that I took after I'd entered his home. I think I'd had a quick chat and asked if I could photograph like where he writes, and he said, no, I'm not allowed to enter that room. And yeah, I sort of just grabbed this photo while he was sort of in thinking about something. I'm not sure. Yeah, seems to be deep in thought. And I was asking him about, I mean, I remember pretty much everything he said, because like there weren't many things that he did say. But I asked him if he was like a morning writer, or if he wrote at night, and he said, I wake up in the morning and my mind is clear.
Wow.
And that was, I guess those are all the words you need to express his Yeah, his morning writing regime. So yeah,
actually, that would be a lovely quote to accompany the portrait. Like you could actually,
yes,
really,
yeah, it would be. So yeah, I mean, we took more pictures. I mean, I thought there were also other portraits that I thought, you know, were nice, but this is, yeah, this might have been the first shot I took the whole day. But yeah, I think they ended up like running in Norway in some publication. He actually is not very, he is not often photographed, but he was very enthusiastic about when we were communicating via email about the offer to be photographed for the National Portrait Gallery. He thought it was, you know, a great honor, and I suppose he was interested in the process and how the photographer was going to go about it.
Hmm. And you mentioned Raymond Gator. Here he is.
Yeah, so he's not a man of few words. We also got along really well, and this is like around the area where he grew up. So it's also sort of this landscapes as a setting for his memoir Romulus, My Father, which is made into a film with Eric Banner and Franco Potente. And yeah, like this is actually the next morning, because I mean, ideally, the more time you can spend with the subject, the better. And this was actually, I mean, the previous afternoon and evening, we'd hung out and sat on his porch on these wrought iron chairs that his father had made. His dad was an ironmonger. And yeah, I mean, it was also 2012. So I would have been preparing to move to Shanghai. So I guess we were talking about China, and I mean, he was talking about it in reference to academia, and he's not much of a cook, but he's able to cook spaghetti, and his wife, who wasn't over, had made a bolognese, so we had that for dinner. I mean, had a couple of beers, drank like a couple of glasses of wine, and then yeah, in the morning, the first light got up and had to walk around the property, and that's when I shot this one. The light was great, and yeah, it was a good experience. Hopefully, yeah, maybe next time I'm in the neighborhood, I'll yeah, get in touch and drop by again. But yeah, he was happy with how the pictures turned out too.
It's lovely hearing you talk about just hanging out with these sort of leading lights of Australian creative enterprise. It's fantastic. And so I think we've got one before, like finishing up our little tour of the collection. Michelle Garno, is this one post your move to Shanghai?
Sorry?
Is this one after you've moved to
China? Yeah, this is 2015. So this was one of the shots from, I was asked to shoot it for Boss magazine, which is AFR magazine. And so often when you commission these sort of editorial shoots, you can't pick the time. This is when she's available for the interview, because of course she's, you know, she's very busy, and this was a time before they would have opened for lunch. So it was really bright. It was totally like not the right time of day to photograph her. So if I had her out on the, yeah, it was a really clear day too. If I had her out on the terrace of her restaurant, on the Bund, you know, she'd be squinting. The light would be overhead, and it would cast like harsh shadows. So I just had it just inside the shade, so the sunlight was sort of blasting off the concrete of the terrace. And just as a hint of the city, you can see over in the top right-hand corner, there's the Shanghai TV tower, the Pearl Tower. And sort of looking into a restaurant, and also her pose, and she's, you know, she seems like a fairly formidable woman, like she looks like a boss, but she's great. But I mean, she's her contribution to the cultural life of Shanghai is fantastic. She established a literary festival, and yeah, she's like the you know, like a legendary figure in the expatriate community in Shanghai. Yeah, so she's been here for a really long time. I mean, I've also interviewed her. I mean, I think I photographed her 3 times, and we had a chat about what drew her to Shanghai. And I mean, she was, I mean, she said it was like a city set in aspic. Back when she went, I mean, it was nothing like now. I mean, I think the Bund hadn't been developed. I mean, all these buildings were empty. The Bund is the historic waterfront. All the skyscrapers hadn't yet popped up across the river in Pudong. And everything was just like, yeah, like the city hadn't changed in like 50 years, unlike Hong Kong, where she'd been living, where they'd just bulldozed everything and, you know, built new land. And this, yeah, so she was kind of, yeah, just drawn to this place. I saw her the other night. I saw her last week, actually. I had a little chat. I mean, she was really chuffed that her her portrait was picked up by the gallery, and her mother was able to go around and see her hanging on the wall. And yeah.
I've never thought of that as our portraits of expatriates, their parents coming to see them in the gallery. That's
right,
really
because she'd probably rarely get back to Australia. So yeah.
Really nice. So that's a good introduction to why did you decide to move to Shanghai in 2012?
I worked there in 2010, and I came back again in 2011, and yeah, just sort of felt like the center of the world, really. I mean, the first time I'd been to New York about 10 years before that, had this just incredible energy, and I felt that in Shanghai. I mean, Shanghai was much more rough around the edges. In 2010, the expo was just sort of they were just gearing up for the expo. I met a lot of people who sort of had been, yeah, like doing really well. Probably, I think I was thinking, well, it's like, apart from like their own skills, but it's by virtue of being in Shanghai, it just seemed like, you know, if you wanted to take the next step it seemed like the place to go. I mean, I wanted to work for a larger caliber of publications, and and do more photography, sort of break a little bit from all the writing that I was doing, and just focus more on photography. And now I'm doing video as well, and not writing so much.
So that's really fascinating. And so we're gonna now take a turn into some of your Shanghai work. So we're going to look at a few images that have recently been included in a show at the Australian Consul General's office. That's
the event that I saw Michelle at last week. Right, so this was at the beginning of when I hadn't, well, yeah, I mean, I'd been commissioned by the German magazine Geo to do a story, actually 2 stories, for a travel issue on Shanghai, and one was on Shanghai's nightlife, which is something I'd already been photographing. It was actually the photo editor was an Australian, and I think they'd just been searching for images and found them in like the archive of Polaris, the agency that represents me. So I was meeting this Chinese-German journalist who I was working with on this story, Shifan Yang, at Mint, which was another Australian connection. The owner or founder of that was a guy called Alistair Patton, who's a pretty colourful character. He was kind of run out of town. I mean, I heard like, you know, all these rumours like that he'd been detained, he was in jail, and then like he was out of the country, and then you know, he said that, you know, basically was forced to sell the nightclub. But it was a very exclusive kind of place, and they claimed that in the previous year they'd sold more Dom Perignon than any club anywhere in the world. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But anyway, like in the champagne is all sort of table service, so it's ostentatious, conspicuous consumption. If you see who's got tables, and then those are the people with money, and anyone who has to go to the bar is like, you know, a bit of a pleb if you can get in the door in the first place. But Mint's closed since then. But anyway, I just come from a shoot from Women's Wear Daily. I think I've been shooting backstage. It's like some lingerie label or something. They'd been at a party and had a couple of glasses of champagne, and just wandering over to Mint to meet this journalist to talk about the story. And I stepped into the elevator, and then this is basically right in front of me. And I just happened to have a camera around my neck that has like a wide angle lens, like a 20mm, and it was actually really bright from these lights on the dancers. So I just remember like frantically changing my settings so I didn't overexpose the shot. And yeah, I think that was the first one. I think I took 2 on the way up to like the 23rd floor or whatever it was in the building, and then sat down for a chat. It was one of the best shots I took in this series, which I kept on developing, and it ended up being showed a couple of times in Australia at the Ballarat International Photo Biennale, and last year at Head On. It was actually an outdoor exhibition at Bondi Beach, of all places, a different kind of decadence.
Oh, let's keep moving through. By stark contrast, what's the story with this one?
So this is the biggest linen manufacturer in the world. Strangely, I ended up like directing a corporate video for this company, and I mounted the camera. It was like a DSLR camera on this crane. Like it's I guess you couldn't really do this shot with a drone, but it was just such an amazing shot from that perspective, because you don't see it from the ground. And I had a remote trigger for this Nikon D800 camera. So while we were rolling and just getting this shot, and I was viewing it on a screen, I just had to. I thought I have to get some stills of this. So it's this sort of wide aspect ratio, because that's how the video came out on that camera. But yeah, I just saw this shot and just like, yeah. Wow. And then that was the end of that video that we were doing.
Wow.
We had to start rolling again.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they run 24 hours a day in 3 shifts, like every day of the year, 8-hour shifts.
Wow. So it's interesting that opportunistic moment of the street photographer. You're alert to that all the time through your, like, even, you know, whatever shoot you're on. And this is one of your street photography works, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's just, it was a nice cold winter's day, and I just went out to shoot. I've been looking at the work actually of Alex Webb, who's one of my favorite photographers, and one thing that he does is he has a lot of, like, his photos are really dense. They have so many layers, and he really sort of fills the frame with the 35mm lens that he uses. So so I got a couple of nice shots that afternoon, but this was kind of, yeah, this is kind of luck. I mean, I think I mean, he just kept on going back and forth. I think I even shot one with my my iPhone that was quite nice. But yeah, so they've just knocked down all of these historic Shikumen sort of lane courthouses, courtyard homes, and yeah, and put in these new sort of luxury ones. I'd also photographed the area, like the people who were sort of holding out and wanted more money for the places that they were living, and they were kind of sort of, you know, sort of like slums of Shanghai. Not much maintenance had been done to these homes, which would have, where, you know, wealthy people would have lived, and there were a lot of, like, many families crammed into one sort of mansion, basically. So I was familiar with the area. It was interesting to see that develop. Yeah.
I just jump in for a second, Penny. Sorry, we had a question a while back, and I thought it was a good interjection at this point, because you just mentioned an influence on your work, Dave. But Neil, one of our regulars, was interested in finding out which creatives you would say have inspired your photography.
Yeah, funny. When I was starting out, I really liked also the film, and also the photography work of Wim Wenders. I did my thesis on him at university, and I even did a internship at his company in Berlin. But he does sort of empty sort of streetscapes mostly. I mean, but I don't do that. But I suppose also the work that he did with Robbie Mueller, like just this sort of like the rigorous sort of composition and light, the use of light. Also, I mean, in color as well as black and white was just really great. I mean, cinema studies was something that really opened my eyes to composition and light, really. I mean, I think before I got into photographers like Alex Webb, I was interested in, like, Sven Nykvist, like Ingmar Bergman's DOP. Later, people like Christopher Doyle, who did a lot of Wong Kar-wai's early stuff, Carly De Palma. Yeah. So yeah, it was later that was photographers that I was influenced by.
That's a great question, Jill and Neil. Thank you. And very good time to bring that up, because we're going to move on to the next. Let's have a little, tell us about this particular one, Dave.
So this is in Heilongjiang, a place called Jinshi. It's where a lot of the world's carbon comes from. So this is a warehouse for sorting sort of carbon, like graphite dust. So yeah, when you see these guys outdoors in the sunshine, I mean, they're basically head to toe silver. So, I mean, carbon is what you need for batteries, and the MacBook Pro that I'm using here would have like a piece of carbon about the size of a slice of toast. But then the batteries that you need to power electric vehicles are much bigger, and it's artificial carbon in Apple products because it's much cleaner. But this was an assignment for Wirtschaftswoche, yeah, like a German publication that they did this story internationally of für dein Auto, like for your car. And it also included like the mining of rare earths in Africa. And yeah, so we basically just walked into this place, and it was incredibly dark. And I happened to have like a face mask just in my camera bag. It was a hot day in the summer, and that white t-shirt never recovered. But yeah, just like spent a couple of minutes in there, and yeah, and it was like really powerful, sort of hellish looking image.
It's interesting, like just getting this insight into both sort of daily life and partying in Shanghai, as well as, you know, the heavy industrial side of Chinese production.
Yeah, actually at the Ballarat International Photo Biennale, my work was sort of presented, or we did a conversation with this guy who was, he used to work on oil rigs up in, also I think up in Heilongjiang. And so he had all these sort of photos of workers sort of in the ice, and it was all this, these really gritty sort of like, you know, hard life of these workers. And we sort of showed side by side with like my pictures of, you know, like the decadent party life in Shanghai.
Oh, right. I see.
But his feelings about that was just, you know, these people are enjoying success, and it was all, he didn't, yeah, he thought it was, yeah, didn't see any, he didn't have any objection to those images or the fun that the people were having.
About this one, it's another slice of life.
Yeah, so that's about 2 blocks from where I live. So this is, just all of a sudden, all of these new sort of security, like surveillance cameras popped up in my neighborhood in the former French concession. I mean, I think I passed through about 12 just to go down my lane. It's similar to this one. So, I mean, although, I mean, like, you know, we're being surveilled by, you know, corporations all the time. If you're online, if you use Instagram's basically creating a psychological profile, just like Facebook is, just like, you know, mining your, you know, your emotions to you know, to sell to more corporations to sell your stuff. But still, I mean, facial recognition technology and having your face scanned is something I feel kind of, I can't really get used to it. But anyway, so this is a change I'd seen in Shanghai, and I wanted to see if I could like capture an image just to add it to my catalogue of Shanghai photos. So I went out one sunny day, and I was shooting film. Actually, this is shot on slide film, and I thought this would be a good sort of, you know, staging place, I suppose, for the photo, but it's not staged. This guy just happened to walk between the cameras. I think I did 2 such photos, and this one worked better. And just, you know, this is how I'm going to frame it, and then I'll see who turns up, and I'll just set my settings so the figure is blurred between these stationary objects in the background. So that's how that picture came about.
It's an image that could be, you know, relevant really, and, you know, a lot of places in the world now too.
Yeah, especially China though, because I mean they've got the majority of the world's like surveillance cameras, and apparently, but it's like this research group said that by the end of this year they'll have more than 1 billion cameras.
And this is another beautiful image from just that you noticed as you're wandering around the cities.
Yeah, this is like another winter's day. I went out. I think this is 2014 or something. Yeah, so they're just these maids at this, I think it was a high-end residential development, and they were just, yeah, cleaning the concrete. So I mean, just I guess the play of colours was something that attracted me to the picture. I took a few nice ones. I like this better than a vertical shot, which is going to be in a book on Shanghai, on modern Shanghai, which is actually launched tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, I don't really sort of, I mean, a friend who's getting into photography was telling me about like composing with triangles, and I think early when I started photography, someone told me about like the rule of thirds, and I didn't know what she was talking about. But I can see that if I break this down, that this is all sort of, you know, the rule of thirds and triangles even. There's like 3 triangles in the shot at least.
got there by pure instinct.
Yes, I don't think about, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, I guess it's, I mean, if you see like you know, a lot of, you know, good movies, I mean, it's sort of, it's, yeah, like the compositional ideas or what's aesthetically appealing just kind of becomes sort of ingrained, I guess.
Yeah, and people bring their own metaphors, and I think actually this one is quite a good one for that, like this sort of window that you're all giving us actually into your time in Shanghai. But this was with a different camera, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's with the Hasselblad X-Pan panoramic camera. So I was trying to find the Yangtze River, which was for this series I've been doing on China's longest river. I was in Chongqing, which is this booming like mountain city on the Yangtze, and also Jinsha, where these two rivers converge. Just, I mean, I think, like, well, including the rural population, there's about 35 million people in this sort of city municipality. And so yeah, anyway, these guys were laying plumbing, and this is an awning of a construction site. So I just came across, I thought, wow, this is a great shot. But the workers noticed me and thought, oh, you know, what's this foreigner doing with a camera, and just like, you know, don't see many of them around here or whatever. And I just had to wait until, you know, they got back to work, and then I took this shot. And then when one of them walked through the door, I took another shot, but this one's better. So yeah, this has been published quite a bit, and won like the Epson International Pano Awards prize for the best film capture, because it's shot on film. Yeah, it looks great, and as a large print, actually. That was in the exhibition last week.
Now we've got about 5 minutes left, and we've got a bit of a treat for everyone to finish off with. So you've been shooting Shanghai Fashion Week, haven't you, Dave?
Yeah, like for about 10 years. I mean, when I came to Shanghai, the first publication I worked for was Women's Wear Daily, and I'm still shooting for them now. And over the last 3 seasons, I've started shooting for US Vogue. So I go out and I shoot what people are wearing. For WWD, also sometimes shoot like general coverage of shows. I might have to shoot runway and shoot all the looks if it's a new collection, and also do a day of this. But this was like 8 days straight, mostly for Vogue. I mean, I also was shooting for a market research company which was interested in jewelry, so I was doing jewelry details as well. So I was pretty busy. And this was, yeah. So these are rich and Shinty, yeah. So I shoot outside the shows. I mean, it's sort of, that's actually just on my street, and these, yeah, I just saw them walking down the street, and I thought, oh, so I positioned myself to capture them crossing the street, and then I asked the girl on the left if I could take a portrait. But they in Vogue, they tend to want people moving, and they like color. They don't head to toe black. Might run now and then, but they want to avoid that.
There are a few more from Fashion Week. So there's actually
apparently that she used to tie up girls for the Japanese photographer Araki. Apparently, it's on her CV. She's like an Australian, Chinese, Japanese. Yeah, Leah.
So there are over 200 of these on the Vogue website, and I think Matt's going to share a link for everyone, because this is only a little taste of the amazing, if you're into fashion, the amazing fashion that Dave got to shoot 8 days straight at Shanghai Fashion Week. And there's just one last series we wanted to share, isn't there?
Yeah.
That you have included at the Shanghai Photo Fair.
Yeah, so there's an exhibition on, well, on modern Shanghai, sort of a bit of a spin-off with this book that's being launched. Lu Hongxing, who's a famous Chinese photographer. He used to be with AP. He was like posted all over the world, photographed the fall of the Soviet Union, Tiananmen Square, Russian withdrawal from Afghanistan, a lot of wars. Also sort of entertainment. Like you'll see his byline appear in newspapers still quite regularly. I mean, like file photo of Prince in concert, or there was like the sort of Australia celebrating their World Cup win, I think back in the 90s. Yeah. But anyway, he put this thing together, and he wanted to show this sort of element of modern Shanghai, because they didn't really have these pictures of like the whole sort of selfie thing in the archive. So this is how I ended up doing it after first going out and doing it sort of reportage style, because you could go to certain streets and, you know, everyone's got a phone, and like, you know, like guys are taking photos of their girlfriends, and girls are hanging out and just sort of sharing the camera around and posing in front of various sort of, you know, photo spots. But that wasn't really quite what he wanted. So he said, "Can you shoot it a bit more like you like you do for Vogue?" So I thought I'd seek out people who are, yeah, mainly sort of like almost professional selfie takers. Some of these like are influencers and fashion bloggers. So yeah, and the idea, I thought that I might be able to get their selfies and sort of somehow sort of use them together, but that didn't really gel as an idea. This is Daisy Dye, is a fashion blogger from Hong Kong, and she's like a former contestant in Miss Hong Kong. The next one is Zoe. She's a model. She did a lot of shows this fashion week. I actually met her at 4 a.m. with her like ex-boyfriend, drinking in front of like a convenience store. And I took a photo with this point and shoot camera and sent it to them. They really liked it. Actually, I think I posted it on my Instagram. So I photographed her a couple of times since then, and I thought she'd be she's very photogenic, so I thought she'd be good to include in this.
It's a really great series. I've never they're really evocative portraits of that particular lifestyle that all of those people are living, and it's really I was really captivated by them when you shared them with us. So we've only got a minute or so remaining, but I have to finish off, Dave, by asking you what's next. What's your next project? What's your next shoot?
Yeah, I might be going to Shanxi province for something. It's an environmental story. I mean, that's just have to see if that'll be confirmed. I mean, this paper, I think, like Greta Thunberg is going to be the guest editor of some issue. So she's been pushing them to put more environmental stories up there. So I did one which was page one of like tree planting in Guizhou, and how the reforestation of this area, I mean, in terms of reducing carbon, had even surprised scientists as being really effective. So the opportunity to travel to all these different corners of China for work is just something I love about being here. So hopefully that'll happen. Otherwise, I'm shooting a sort of jazz Christmas party at the St. Regis Hotel. I'm sort of producing that shoot, and I think my wife is going to be the lead photographer on that, and I'll be doing the video, and even editing the video, because the budget's a bit low and I'll have to do it myself.
Oh wow, that's a great answer to end. Thank you so much, Dave. That's been just a brilliant journey for all of us, and a great insight into your work and your life as a photographer living in Shanghai. So I think, Jill, I'm handing back to you. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Penny and Dave. That was really such a fascinating variety of work that you do. I mean, you know, environmental shoots to jazz parties, you know, Christmas parties. There's just such a broad range of things. I can see why you think that Shanghai is the center of the world. It just sounds like an incredible melting pot of people and places and photographic subjects. So thank you so much for giving up so much time to talk to us about that today. Photography is the theme of the month, this month for the Portrait Gallery. Because we've reopened now after lockdown, our Living Memory National Photographic Portrait Prize is being extended until the 16th of January. So I hope that some of you in Australia may be able to make it here to Canberra to see that exhibition before it finishes. If not, jump on our website, portrait.gov.au, and check out all of the finalists and vote for your favourite in this year's exhibition. Also, the call for entries for next year's National Photographic Portrait Prize has opened. So photographers out there, get your cameras snapping and get your entries in for that. And hopefully we'll see some of your works on the walls of the National Portrait Gallery in 2022. Jump on our website also if you'd like to find out what programs are coming up. Next week in the photography themed Thursday lunchtime sessions, we will be talking to Scottish, Australian and now Parisian-based artist, photographer, Nikki Toole. So please don't miss that one. It'll be a fantastic conversation with her next week. Until next time, stay safe and thank you so much for joining us today. Take care. Bye-bye.